Okay. So welcome everyone. This is the Pre-Proposers Conference for Appendix A of the 2023 HERO, Human Exploration Research Opportunities, sponsored by the Human Research Program. Steve Platts will be giving you some background on the program and its goals with this solicitation. Then I will do a little bit about some of our newer approaches to this review in particular, and then we'll open the floor for questions. So, Steve?
All right, thanks, Ben. Good morning, everyone. For those on the West Coast, thanks for joining us early in the morning. I hope this briefing will be useful for you. My name is Steve Platts. I am the Chief Scientist of the Human Research Program. And like Ben said, I'll be going over some of the basics of the solicitation. This one's easy because it's only an omnibus opportunity. There isn't a flagship with it, so it's a single appendix, Appendix A. So this one will be a little more basic and a little easier to go through than usual. And like Ben said, we have some new information for you on the way we're going to do peer review, and I will introduce that, and then Ben will spend more time on it after my talk. So next slide, please, Ben. So what is a pre-proposers conference? So this is intended to clarify the solicitation and make sure that folks who might be interested in applying understand what we're talking about. We give you more information, and then this gives you an opportunity to ask questions. The conference is open to all. It's not limited to past proposal winners or grantees or anything. Anybody can participate. The Q&A will be posted on the NSpire's website. There may be some questions that we can't answer right away, and so we will ask for your patience, find an answer for it, and then it will be posted on the NSpire's website. So everyone will have an opportunity to see that. That's one of the things that we're required to do, is make sure it's open to all. Next slide. So a little bit about the Human Research Program. One of the most important things for folks to understand is that we are an applied research program. We're not a basic research program. There is a basic research program in NASA called Space Biology. They also do solicitations like this, and they're run through NSpire's as well. So if you're interested in doing some more basic research, that's a great venue to investigate. But for HRP, what we do is we perform the research necessary to understand and reduce risks to the crew in long duration spaceflight. And we enable development of medical and human performance standards. These are things like exercise requirements, nutritional requirements, radiation exposure limits, and things like that. We also develop and validate technologies that we can use to both identify and reduce those risks. These are things like the ultrasound that's aboard the space station right now, or other hardware that we can use for medical purposes. Next slide. So this is our plan. HRP uses sort of a phased approach. There are different ways that we can study the effects of spaceflight on the human. We can do studies here on Earth. There are a number of different analogs that work really well. I'll talk about those in a second. Low Earth orbit, the International Space Station, we do a lot of research there. And that research can be thought of as an analog for longer duration or exploration spaceflight, and we do a lot of that. It's the only place that we can get microgravity research done. There is no microgravity chamber here on Earth, despite what the movies and TV shows want to depict. And so that's the place where we can get that accomplished. And we have several different projects underway to do that. And then finally, lunar missions. I mean, we've been hearing about Artemis all week. We had a beautiful splashdown of the Orion capsule, and we will be able to use all of the lunar work that we'll be doing as an
Sorry, Steve, are you still there? It seems like we lost audio.
Oh, yep. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, there you are.
Okay, good. All right. So next slide, please. Still seeing the, oh, there we go. So the characteristics of HRP, we are composed of 5 elements. And these elements are responsible for doing the specific research and solicitations that we'll be talking about. So for EXMC, I see Ben Easter is on the line. Ben, would you say a few things about your element, please? Hey, Ben, I don't think that you've elevated Ben Easter, so he needs to get elevated so he can talk. There we go.
Thanks, Steve. Can you hear
Hey,
me
Ben.
now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Perfect. Yep, I was just entering in the chat that I did not have privileges to unmute myself. So, good morning, everyone. Ben Easter. I'm the Deputy Element Scientist for Exploration Medical Capability. As our element's name would suggest, we are focused on how we are going to deliver medical or clinical care on exploration missions, and specifically thinking about how the provision of that care will be different from what we do today in low Earth orbit. So kind of within that high level summary, some of the things that our element is very interested in is looking at probabilistic risk analysis of medical risk on exploration missions. We're looking at, how we advance providing Earth-independent medical operations and enhancing the ability of the crew to perform medical operations in autonomous fashion, and then also helping to demonstrate and validate technologies, medical technologies that we will need for exploration missions. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Human Factors and Behavioral Performance, or HFBP as we call them. Sandra Whitmire is on the line, and she is the element scientist. Sandra?
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm the element scientist for Human Factors and Behavioral Performance, and Dr. Brian Gore is our deputy. And in our element, we are looking to mitigate risk as it relates to individual behavioral and psychological health and performance, as well as team level outcomes. And so we look at risks relative to lunar missions, how psychological and behavioral health and performance may be affected by high tempo operations, adverse day-night cycles, minimal comm delay, and how we can work to provide the same level of care that we do now in low Earth orbit, given the risks with lunar missions as well as Mars. We also focus on, along those lines, the human factor side of HRP. And so how can we best design the system to be human-centric and to mitigate performance risks for future missions? That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sandra. For human health countermeasures, Becky Bracato's online. Becky?
Hi there. Good morning, everyone. My name is Becky Braccato. I am the Deputy Element Scientist in HHC under Dr. Mike Stenger. He's our element scientist. As the slide depicts, we do physiology research, and this spans 3 different portfolios. We have a cardiovascular and vision portfolio that houses all of our research for cardiovascular risk, as well as the SANS risk, or spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome. We have our exercise and performance portfolio that houses all of our research for the sensory motor risk, EVAs, that's surface EVAs, not microgravity EVAs, exercise, that's muscle and aerobic, and bone, and our multi-systems portfolio that houses all of our research for the immune, microhost, and food and nutrition risks. And for all of these, we follow the similar trajectory as other elements in HRP, where we aim to characterize the risk, develop countermeasures if needed, and validate those across a variety of DRMs. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Becky. For space radiation, it's very much what it sounds like. They study the biological effects of radiation exposure on the human. And when we say radiation, everyone instantly thinks of cancer. And yes, that is one of the risks that they look at. But they also look at the biological effects of radiation on the central nervous system as well as the cardiovascular system. So they're integrated with other elements as well. For research operations and integration, they're a little bit different. They don't solicit their own specific research, but I will let Dr. Brandon Vesey tell you a little bit more about their element. Brandon?
Steve, and good morning, everybody.
Oh, I can't really hear you, Brandon. Can you get closer to the mic?
Is that coming through any better?
Oh, there you go. Much better. Thank
Okay. Yeah, so thanks, Steve, and good morning, everybody. So I'm Brandon Vesey. I'm the element scientist for research operations and integration. My deputies are Dr. Sarah Whiting and Dr. Sherry Ubry. As Steve mentioned, we're a little bit different from the other research elements in HRP. We're really, we often call ourselves a service element, where we take the research studies that are being conducted by the different elements and PIs in HRP and integrate those into different environments, including space flight and different Earth-based analogs, and implement that research. So we really kind of put ourselves in the spot of taking the ideas of the research and helping to turn them into reality, and making sure that when they do shift into those operational realities, that we're able to meet the requirements of the research and do the research in the right way to get good scientific return for HRP and for all the investigators.
All right, thanks, Brandon. We also fund the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. We call it TRISH. You'll notice we have acronyms for everything because we're NASA, so we must make an acronym out of it. And if it spells an actual word, that's even better. So we have a cooperative agreement with TRISH, and what we have them do is pursue more disruptive breakthrough approaches and technologies. They're sort of our skunk works. Going out there and beating the bushes and trying to find things that are maybe a little more high risk, high reward than what a traditional program within NASA can accomplish. And finally, we also collaborate with other NASA programs and other government agencies. So NIH, CDC, NSF, the whole alphabet soup we typically collaborate with, but in particular, we do a lot of collaboration with space biology. A good example of that is the veggie experiment, where we're growing crops in space, and space biology is interested in the seeds and what type of media to grow the plants in and those type of things. And we're interested in the nutritional countermeasure that provides, as well as the psychological countermeasure of being able to have a fresh salad midway through your mission. So this is one of those collaborations where everybody wins. We save money for the taxpayer, and we get a lot of great information. And we have several different projects that are similar to that. Next slide. I mentioned some of the venues that we use for conducting research. Obviously, the International Space Station. The one caveat is, since this appendix is for omnibus only, flight studies are off the table. So you cannot propose to do a flight study in 1 year with 150K. It's just not feasible. We also do bed rest in Germany at the NVHAB facility. Most of our radiation work is done at the NSRL at Brookhaven National Labs, and this is the only place in the world where you can simulate galactic cosmic radiation. We also do parabolic flights and a number of different isolation analogs. So the Hera is here at Johnson Space Center, and this is our short duration isolation facility run by ROI. And then we also do work at Antarctica. So we have experiments going on at multiple different stations in Antarctica, and it gives us a slightly different flavor of isolation. Next slide. And so one of the things that you all will be doing if you write a proposal is addressing those proposals to specific risks within the HRP integrated path to risk reduction. This is all included in the solicitation announcement, and there are links to get to all of this information. But we have a number of risks that have been dedicated. I think there's 30 right now. And you can see here with the different missions, some of them are green, some of them are yellow, and some of them are red. Most of our efforts go towards the red risks, especially the ones that are red for lunar and for Mars. But we do work for the yellow as well, and occasionally green if our desire is to optimize that risk, reducing mass or improving a countermeasure or something like that. So these will be important to pay attention to when you're writing your proposals, because it is a requirement that your proposals address at least one risk on this chart. Next slide. As you can imagine, there are a number of constraints that HRP has to deal with. They're based on schedule, crew access, and our need for risk mitigation. And this is a little different from writing for NIH or NSF. Our station and analogs are limited resources. We have very strict time constraints that are out of our control. The mission flies when the mission flies, and if our countermeasures aren't ready, that's a problem. And so for us, an investigation should significantly contribute to our risk reduction focus. We often say that it doesn't have to greatly advance the field. It can be an incremental improvement, and it doesn't have to be highly innovative as a specific category like you might see in NIH. Again, it's most important that you directly address one or more risks in our risk portfolio. Next slide. So here are some questions that our panels will be asking. So it's good for you. And these are taken directly from the NRA announcement. So as I've mentioned, does the study directly address one or more risks and the associated gaps within our integrated research plan? How well does the proposal demonstrate that the data to be produced are needed to understand or reduce the risk? Is it a must-have or is it a nice-to-have? If the task will produce a new model, technology, procedure, or tool, how well does the proposal detail how it will better quantify or mitigate the risk to human spaceflight? And then finally, if the aims of the application are achieved, how will our scientific knowledge or technology to be advanced? So these are all things to make sure that you put into your proposals. Next slide, please. Statistical considerations are particularly important for us because our work is largely low N. And so a robust statistical design of your experiments is important. We have at least one statistician on every review panel for this purpose. Sometimes you can't get ideal sample sizes or statistical power or control all the variables. And it's incredibly important that you have a rigorous data analysis plan that you can explain to the panel. Your proposed sampling procedures, experimental design, and data analysis will be evaluated by that statistician I mentioned as part of the review. And then here's a figure that just represents the type of power analysis that we're hoping that folks will do. And then finally, step 2 proposals must include a dedicated section describing your statistical approach or justification for not needing one. And I should stress that that justification has to be very strong. Next slide. So just to give an overview of this whole process, so it's a two-step process. Step 1 proposals will be submitted to NASA, including a synopsis of the intended research. The page limit for this is 1 page, so it's essentially a letter of intent, very short. Those Step 1 proposals are due January 6, 2023 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, not Central Time. The Step 1 proposals must follow the specifications listed in the solicitation, and only applicants who submit a relevant Step 1 proposal will be invited to submit Step 2 proposals. So our elements and the program office reviews those Step 1s to make sure that they actually address a risk in a meaningful way. And then we invite those that do to submit a Step 2. The Step 2 proposal window opens on February 3rd and closes on April 4th, 2023, again at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The page limits for the Step 2 proposals are 5 pages for an omnibus. So again, it's a nice short proposal. They will be reviewed both for merit and for programmatic relevance. The merit reviews are done by NRAS, so Ben Goodman's group. They assemble the panels and do the peer review. And then once that's done, we do an internal programmatic review to look at the programmatic balance, feasibility, and cost of the proposals to make sure that they fit within our cost benefit analysis and our overall portfolio. So it is possible that you could receive a relatively good score and still not get funded if it's not a study that's feasible. One example I often use is one proposal included flying a 3 Tesla MRI to the space station. And for many different reasons, something like that is never going to happen. Another study that did not get funded wanted to do blood draws on the crew members every 15 minutes for 48 hours. That basically included waking them up every 15 minutes to do the blood draws. And again, that's something that's not feasible and will never happen. The final award decisions will be announced in the August to September timeframe. We left this a little more open than usual because that's right towards the end of our fiscal year. And sometimes we slip a day or two, and we didn't want to give a firm date that we might end up missing. So in that August-September timeframe will be the award decisions. Next slide. So this is a new thing for us, and Ben is going to spend more time on it in a minute, but I just wanted to introduce it. So we are moving to a dual anonymous peer review. What does this mean? So this means that not only will the reviewers be anonymous to the proposers, but the proposers will now be anonymous to the reviewers. And so you will not know the PI's name, you will not know their institution when you're doing the scientific evaluation of the proposal. And I'll leave it to Ben to explain all of the mechanics of that. The primary intent is to eliminate unconscious bias. And so NASA has done a pilot study using the system and found that diversity was increased with this system. And so one of the primary goals that HRP is striving towards is to improve diversity and inclusion, and this is one way for us to do it. Next slide. So this is will be Appendix A Omnibus. So these are short-term investigations or technology developments. Basically, it's a way to provide preliminary data for a later grant application. They're great for younger faculty or for students. We do not prohibit students from being PIs on studies like NIH does. So you do not have to be a faculty member to write a grant proposal for us. We have a couple subcategories within the omnibus. The first is the new investigator opportunity. So this is for PIs who have not had HRP, NSBRI, EPSCoR, or TRISH funding in the last 10 years. This does not apply to co-investigators, only to PIs. We also have one called the early career investigator opportunity. And so this is for a PI who fits the above criteria, but also has completed their terminal research degree or end of postgraduate clinical training within the past 10 years. And so a typical omnibus award is for 1 year at $150,000. But these two opportunities, both the new investigator and the early career, allow the PI to apply for a second year of funding if exceptional progress has been made. So this would allow folks who fit in these categories to have a total of 2 years of funding at $300K total. So as I mentioned earlier, flight experiments are not solicited, only ground and analog studies, and they will be evaluated for feasibility. So if you're proposing to do a study in HERA that will take 4 years or something, that's not going to work with this opportunity. It has to be able to be completed within 1 year with the budget of $150,000. Next slide. To summarize, I just did. Omnibus awards are $150,000 total for 1 year. Early career and new investigator are eligible for a second year of funding with exceptional progress. The dual anonymous peer review that we call DAPR will be used for both Step 1 and Step 2 proposals beginning this year. And then, as I said, the final selections will be announced in August or September of next year, 2023, which is this fiscal year, but next calendar year. Next slide. All right, so that's it for me. I am going to pass the baton over to Ben Goodman. Ben?
All right. Thank you, Steve. Give me one moment here. I'm going to pull up my thing. Slides, that is. All right. Okay. So I'm going to just give a little background on dual anonymous peer review to give folks a bit of a primer. I know that these are step ones, so it's not a full proposal. So it'll give you a good chance to wet your feet a bit in the process before getting your step twos done, which are a little bit more involved. So first thing, why dual anonymous peer review? As Steve mentioned, there's an equity and inclusion motive here. A key goal of peer review is to level the playing field for everyone. It is difficult to interrupt biases through training alone, and it requires structural changes. And our friends in the Science Mission Directorate have been experimenting with this approach of dual anonymous peer review. The goal here is to create a change in the tenor of the discussions away from the individuals on the proposing team and towards the proposed science. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as we go through the explanation here, is that the goal here is to change the tenor in the discussions. It's not necessarily to make it impossible to guess who these folks are. It's to move the discussion away from that focus. So dual anonymous peer review is not a completely blind process. The proposers will submit, for their step twos, an anonymized proposal and a non-anonymized expertise and resource document. And when we get to those step two proposals, the merit of the proposal document will be assessed anonymously, and that's determined separately from the non-anonymized qualifications of the team, which is handled afterwards. So before anyone gets too worried about track records not being taken into account, we will be taking into account qualifications and track record and access to unique facilities. We just do so after we determine the scientific merit of the proposal. And I'll explain a little more about that in a moment. First, though, I do want to note, and this is the most important part for this step, for this point in the process in particular, is that when it comes to submission of anonymized proposals, this is going to be the thing that's going to, I know, be on a lot of people's minds. You will be entering information into Inspire's for the cover pages as normal, and Inspires will take care of anonymizing that information. The only change to what you enter into the Inspires cover pages will be in the proposal summary, where you'll just want to make sure that you are abiding by the anonymization procedures. And for that proposal summary and any PDF attachments, for the step 1 or for the proposal document in the step 2, you'll just want to make sure that you are excluding the names and affiliations of the proposing team, including in figures and in references to personal websites, if any. You want to make sure that you are using numeric references, and there's an example there. So instead of referencing by name, you're going to reference by number. It's just a preferred format there to try and, again, shift the discussion a bit away from the people, because we do know that everyone self-references quite a bit. The other thing, do not claim ownership of past work in any part of in any of the anonymous parts of your proposal. So, don't say my previously funded work or our analyses as shown in the following reference or something like that. So what you do want to do is cite references in passive third person. So prior analysis indicates that blah, blah, blah. Do describe the work proposed as you would normally. We propose to do the following. We will measure the effects of. Just make sure that you're not attributing any specific references or work to your team in a way that would identify you or your organization. For the step 2s, you will include a separate non-anonymized expertise and resources document. Again, that's just for the step 2s, not for the step 1s, which is what we're looking at right now. That's the current period of step 1. So when we get to those step 2s, there will be that expertise and resources document, but not for the step 1s. One big question that we get when we talk about this approach is how to reference unpublished works or proprietary results. It's occasionally important to cite exclusive access data sets or non-public data or software, something that hasn't been published yet. Any of these might reveal or strongly imply the investigators on the proposal. In these instances, you must use language such as obtained in private communication or from private communication or from private consultation when you're referring to such potentially identifying work. So do not say, our preliminary data. You say, the data in figure 1 obtained in private communication shows blah, blah, blah. And we understand that this is not the most perfect solution to this, but it is the best one that we have. And the important thing to recall there is that the goal of this approach is to shift the tenor of the discussion, not necessarily to make it absolutely impossible to guess the team members. And that's the key thing to remember in this process. When it comes to the review, for the step 2s, and so for the step 1s are a little different because there is no expertise and resources document there. They'll just be looking at relevance based on the anonymized PDF attachment that you provide in your step 1. For the step 2s, and this, so this is just kind of a preview for that, there will be a science review where each proposal PDF will be assessed based on significance, mitigation of risk to crew health, approach, and statistical plan. And what you will notice there, if you're familiar with the program from past years, is that we used to also have 2 categories for the science review, which were investigators and environment. We don't have those anymore because the proposal PDF will be anonymous, and so the science review will be just looking at that proposal PDF and assessing it on these 4 criteria. After all of those science reviews are complete at the panel review meeting, then the panel reviewers will go over to then the expertise and resources documents will be unmasked, and the reviewers will be able to look at them and quickly assess the teams as either uniquely qualified, qualified, or unqualified. So They are more or less getting a thumbs up or thumbs down so you all more or less get a thumbs up, thumbs down on the abilities of the team to perform the work. The expectation is that the vast majority of proposals will end up as qualified. I mean, that, if you're proposing the work, presumably you're qualified to do the work. So our expectation is that that will be the majority thing. If there's a case where a panel says that someone is uniquely qualified or unqualified, they'll need to justify that in the document. But otherwise, like I said, majority should be qualified. One thing I do want to note here is that the expertise and resources review phase for those step 2s cannot be used by the panel to reevaluate proposals or to change the assigned adjectival grade. So this is not something that's going to play into that scientific merit. It's a separate thumbs up, thumbs down on can the team accomplish the work. So not impinging on the quality of the work as presented in the proposal PDF. I do want to note that we are trying this. It's not we are still working and adapting. We're observing and analyzing other programs as they adopt and adapt the DAPR approach to peer review. And it's not just the Science Mission Directorate anymore. The Space Technology Mission Directorate has also been piloting this. And of course, the Space Operations Mission Directorate in HRP. We do have formal support and Inspires for this. This does represent a major shift in the evaluation of proposals, and as such, we do know that there may be occasional slips in writing the anonymized proposals. NASA reserves the right to return without review proposals that are particularly egregious in terms of identification of the proposing team. So just something to keep in mind. NASA also acknowledges that some proposed work may be so specialized that despite attempts to anonymize the proposal, the identities of the team members are readily discernible. As long as the guidelines are followed, NASA will not return these proposals without review. So what we're asking for is basically a good faith effort from all of you all. And I know we have a really strong community, so we're eager to see what you all come up with. But yeah, but the key thing to keep in mind is that DAPR has promised in increasing the focus on the science during reviews and reducing unconscious bias, and that's the goal that we're chasing after with this. So I know this is kind of a shortened presentation, but other key thing just to keep in mind is that for the step 1s, it's the proposal PDF should be anonymized. So make sure that you're taking a look at that. And we do have guidelines on Inspires for how to anonymize things appropriately. A lot of them are some of the things that I went over here. There's also some examples in that document. And I highly recommend that you take a look at that guidance. It's on the Hero 2023 website on Inspires. So with that, I think we are good to move to questions. Or Steve, if you have anything else you wanted to say.
No, I think we're good to move on to questions. Thanks, Ben.
So if you have questions, you may place them in the chat. There we go. So Steve, I think that first one is for you. How many awards will be given?
That's a good question. We're not 100% sure how many will be given. At least one, and possibly the number that we've been kicking around is up to 6, but we're not quite sure how much funding we'll have for this just yet.
And the next question is, will there be future webinars with more detail on how proposers can adapt their applications to fit DAPR? So I think that Kat Rahill may be able to speak some more to that. I believe that we are planning one after the step 1 invites go out. Is that correct, Kat?
Hi, Ben. We've had some initial discussions about having a follow-up. I think it could be beneficial for PIs if there's some follow-on questions, since it's the first time we're going to be going through this cycle. I will defer to Steve, though, if he has any other commentary for that.
No, I think it's a good idea for us to do a webinar. So yeah, I think that sounds good.
And again, I would suggest that you take a close look at the guidance that is on the Inspires Hero 2023 website, and make sure that you do your best to adhere to that and check it before you send questions to the program. Is soliciting opinions of element scientists prior to application encouraged?
This is a tough one. Actually, it is not, because as soon as a solicitation proposal is announced and sent out, the element scientists are very limited in the advice they can give you because of the rules and regulations. It has to be something very generic that anybody could know or find out, so they can't give you specific advice on a proposal. The best time to ask advice from the element scientists is in the periods between solicitations when there's nothing currently active, and then they're free to just discuss ideas and things like that with you. So if you were to ask an element scientist right now about something, they would only be able to give you very generic advice, and you probably would not be, it probably wouldn't be that helpful.
My understanding is that these awards are for data that is already collected. Is that accurate?
No, that is not. That is one possibility. Another possibility is doing, you know, a short experiment in your laboratory, or doing new, you know, surveys or something. Those things are all possible if you can accomplish them in the time period and with the budget allotted. But it does not have to be a retrospective analysis. That's not a requirement.
There's a second part to that question, which is also, how do we refer to already collected data in DAPR appropriate ways? So I'm going to field that one. It was a question that we do get. If you have access to unique data, the way to phrase it is just like that, to say that the team has access to a unique data set resulting from the following project, and you can cite the project from taskbook or from the grant number. And just note that, and just leave out of it that it is your project if it is your project. Obviously, because of collaborations and everything, it might not be your project. And of course, if it is NASA's data, then you might just note that the data is available through the LSDA or some other public resource. Is there a limit on the number of investigators on one proposal?
No, there is not.
Another webinar after step ones are announced would be great. Thank you. For new PIs or early career investigations, considering the potential for cost extension to a second year, should the proposal aim to cover a 1 year or 2 year timeline?
So what we typically tell people is to cover the 1 year, and then the possibility of an extension can be discussed when we see what that 1 year looks like. You don't want to assume that you will get the second year spreading the work out and then not have exceptional progress in that first year and not getting the second year.
Does the application need to identify TRISH as the target funding source, or is this decision made by reviewers?
So this is not a TRISH solicitation. This is a NASA HRP solicitation. TRISH is just our institute that we fund separately. They do their own separate solicitation. So this solicitation is not related to TRISH.
I have received an EPSCoR Seed subaward. Basically, it was awarded to University of Mississippi, and they distributed to 3 researchers in different Mississippi universities as a research infrastructure development grants. Am I eligible for this omnibus opportunity since there is no award from NASA under my name? I assume that this is speaking about the early career or new investigator.
Yeah, that's what I was assuming too. So you can always apply to the Omnibus Award. We have no restrictions for that. If you were to think that you're eligible for the early career or new investigator, it depends on whether or not you're listed as a PI. If you're listed as a PI, then you're not eligible for those. You're only eligible for the standard Omnibus Award. If you're not listed as a PI, if you're listed as a co-I or a participant, then you will still be eligible for the early career and new investigator awards.
Can proposers prospectively collect data from analog facilities owned by NASA or ongoing research at these facilities?
If it fits within the 1 year, $150,000 constraints and is deemed feasible during the feasibility analysis, then yes. But don't propose something that's going to take, you know, a single HERA run essentially takes a full year plus just to do the data collection, and then you'd have to do data analysis and everything. So there's really no way you can do that in a year. So I would be very careful about trying to squeeze too much work into that 1 year time frame.
Is the submitting organization considered in the expertise and resources review? And the answer there is that non-anonymized expertise and resources portion of the Step 2 proposal does contain identifying information for the organization and team members. So it is a part of that assessment, yes. Can a green card holder, non-US citizen, apply for this grant?
You know the answer to that, Ben?
My understanding is that as long as you are based at a US institution, you may apply for NASA grants because NASA makes grants to institutions, not individuals.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. I just wanted to make sure. So I guess the answer to that one is yes, as long as you're at a US institution.
Is retrospective data analysis feasible within a 1 year timeline?
So I think the answer is it depends. If you have access to data readily and all you need to do is analyze it, then I would say yes. If you're going to need to request research data from NASA, I would say it's possible. If you're going to request medical data from NASA, I would say it would be very difficult to achieve that entire project within a 1 year time frame. So unfortunately, it's kind of a squishy answer. It depends on what data you're going to analyze.
Sorry, so yes, the person in question added a clarification that it would be accessing NASA data. So.
Yeah, but we have lots of different kinds of NASA data, right? If you want to access data that's already in LSAH or LSDA that's easy to get to, that's formatted properly and everything, it can be done in that time frame. If you want to access something that will require the NASA folks to dig in and transcribe data from handwritten records into the database, that's not going to happen in our time frame. So again, it really depends on what kind of data, whether it's research data, medical data, and where those data reside.
And I believe we have points of contact for some of those resources in the solicitation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or websites, at least, where you can find points of contact. I think that's the last one that I have on the chat currently. Oh, there we go. The early career investigation specifications state that the terminal research degree must have been completed within the last 10 years. Are you referring to the highest level of degree possible to receive in the area of study, or the most recently completed degree regardless of level, e.g. master's? And I assume that's for a situation where you maybe got a master's after getting your PhD or something?
The way it's designed is, so for the terminal degree is typically considered your PhD, your MD, things like that. Although we don't have a requirement that you have to be a PhD to get funding. So if you have a master's degree, you can apply, and we allow students to apply. So obviously, you don't have to already have your PhD in order to submit a proposal for us.
Great, and that answers the follow-up question as well.
Mm-hmm.
Must you have a PhD?
Nope, not for us.
May staff apply?
Yes, they may. As long as your university is good with it. Some universities don't allow that. I know where I did my postdoc, they did not allow that.
Yes, that's a good note for both staff and students or postdocs who might be thinking of applying. Please do check with your sponsored research office or whatever name they go by to make sure that they will submit the proposal on your behalf, because NASA requires AOR sign-off for submission. AOR being authorized organizational representative. Is supporting salaries of investigators an allowable expense?
Yes, it is.
May a private research business apply?
Yes, they may. I like the easy questions.
Yeah, I know, I was just about to say the same thing. What registrations does a business need to have to apply? Example, SAM.
I do not know the answer to that question. Kat, do you know the answer to that?
Sorry, my VPN is acting up. Are we talking about the most recent question in the chat or the one before?
The one, what registration does business need to have to apply? For example, Sam, do you know?
I can look that up for you really quick, and I can either respond in the chat. If you just give me 1 minute, I can pull that up.
Okay, and if we don't have time, because we only have a few minutes left, if we don't have time, it will go onto the Inspire's website.
Yes, I know that to apply to apply whether you are using grants.gov or Inspires, you do have to be registered in Inspires to submit a proposal, and registration in Inspires requires a SAM registration. I would recommend that if you are not registered in SAM, that you get started on that as soon as possible, because it can take 3 weeks or so. So just Yeah, if you're not registered in SAM and you're intending to apply, do get on that, because you cannot register in Inspires until you have registered in SAM.
All right, so the next question is, are there limits on indirect costs in the budget? So NASA looks at indirect costs differently than NIH and other groups. We don't have a separate line for indirects, and so that 150,000 includes the indirects. So you just incorporate that into your budget as you would anything else. Do we have a limit on how high that can be? I don't think so.
I'm not aware of one.
Yeah. Is there a limit on the number of proposals that can be submitted from an organization? No. I know one cycle when I was an investigator, I submitted 12 just all by myself. So there is no limit on the number that you can submit.
So one thing I should add about indirect costs is that those are usually negotiated between a government agency and the organization. And you should go by whatever the negotiated rate is for your organization, because you will be asked to cite it when you are putting in your indirects and Inspires. Of course, budgets, only for Step 2 proposals. You will not need to enter a budget for your Step 1.
Another good reason to make sure you talk to your budget office or your grants office ahead of time. Don't just make assumptions that everything will be fine and there are no restrictions. It's surprising how many universities have different rules for what you can and can't do.
All right, I think we are coming to the end of the hour.
Mm-hmm. Any last minute questions? We are at our time. All right. Well, thank you all very much for listening. I wish you all the best of luck in your proposals. If you have general questions or procedure questions, feel free to submit them to the folks who are listed in the solicitation announcement. But remember, very specific research questions will have to be deferred because we are now in the active period for the proposal. So thank you all very much and have a great day.